What's up, YouTube, Gen X, Bittersweet? I'm going to make this one short. Because I know that, you know, when there's a lot of people making good videos, you don't have enough time. You know, like you want to get through a whole bunch of videos, but they're longer in length. So, you know, I do my best to try to keep my videos under 10 minutes or whatnot. But anyways, I was having a conversation that ended with me saying bittersweet, and that I would do a response to elaborate on what I meant by bittersweet in the context of that conversation. So this is that video. So, you know, she knows who it is. You know, she knows that I'm responding to her. I'm not going to put her name out there, or at least her screen name. It's hard for both black men and black women to exist outside the box, especially if you're somewhat younger, because as a human being, you want a support group. You know, you want to be around a group of people that you can honestly say that, you know, they are your peers and you fit in with them. You know, you don't have to be something that you're not. So it's very difficult to be outside the box because you need that group. And oftentimes you are solo. Or even if you do find a group that may not, you know, be black, you guys get along, but there's still areas that they don't know about you, and there's stuff that you still have to be mindful for, right? You know, I'm lucky enough, like I said, to have my group of black men that are outside the box, and I feel completely at home. You know, they know me, they know my family, they know my extended family, so literally there's no division. It's all one big happy family. I'm thankful for that. You know, really I am. To not have to distinguish between like a brother and a friend, like it's just all one big massive clump. But I know a lot of brothers don't have all that, so it's kind of like, you know, you're on your solo mission. Now, and a lot of black women don't have it either, so they're also on a solo mission. But I will say that it is somewhat easier for black men to be outside of the box than it is for black women, because as a man, it's okay to be solo. You know, you're supposed to walk to the beat of your own drum. You're supposed to find your own way. You are supposed to take the road less traveled. You know, especially if you can't find a group to fit in with, you know, you're a grown-ass man. Do what you need to do and stop complaining about it. So with that being said, it's somewhat easier for men to, you know, be outside the box and to not have that support group. But for a lot of your black women, I would say it's somewhat more difficult, right? Because women do need that, you know, group, that emotional support or whatever. Even if it's women that they may not like or get along with, they need those women to be there, right? You know, I need them. You know, I need to be able to say, hey, let's, you know, go buy ice cream and, you know, talk about how we hate men or whatnot. Like, women need all that, right? To the point where they may not have much in common, but, you know, at least they're there for each other. You know, like I said, I've seen women make friendships on the most dumbest shit ever, right? But because they don't want to be by themselves or not have a support group, they stick together. And the second that one of them gets the man, peace out, right? Like I said, for a lot of your black women, it's all about sisterhood, right? But the second she gets the man she wants, that sisterhood is no more. She is gone. She is tired of the negativity. She is tired of the drama. She doesn't want them women potentially stealing her man. You know, brothers, we don't do all that. You know, the boys that I have before you are the boys that I'm going to have while I'm with you, and if we somehow go our separate way, they're still going to be there. You know, I'm not worried about my boys potentially stealing my girl or sabotaging my relationship. I'm not worried about that at all. You know, like I said, the selling point for a lot of the women that do get involved with men in my camp is that they know that their man has solid friends around them. Like, literally, it's a selling point, because they know that she's dealing with a man that has a support group that holds him accountable. So if something's going wrong, she knows that she can come to one of us and say, hey, this is a problem, can you help me out? Right? That's how we operate. It's not like y'all where it's like, oh, peace out, I'm done with y'all, I got the man I'm looking for. But that's a rant side note. But at the end of the day, it is somewhat more difficult, right? I will say that. So you have a lot of your women that mentally, they're outside the box, they're ready to go, but physically they're not. They're still inside the box. You know, just in terms of their everyday life, it's still inside of the box. But they dream of not being in the box. It's almost like they're a prisoner in a prison in which they have the key. I'm trapped in this prison, but yet I have the key. That's how I view it. So as much as it looks like it's a bad situation, you do have the keys that you need to get out. It's not easy, but you have the key, or the set of keys, right? So here's where the bittersweet comes into play. For a lot of your black men who are outside the box, you're not going back. You're just not going back, and it's not something that you're going to debate about. Like I said, there are areas that I will debate, negotiate, or do whatever we have to do, but then there's certain areas where there's no bend. I'm not going to go back there. It's like the movie where you have the bad guy that's like, I'm never going to go back to prison. I'll die before I go back there. That's how a lot of black men feel. I'm not going back to that place. I don't care who's there. Right? I'm not going to go back to that place. I can help, from the outside. I can kind of like, throw in like a life raft or, some pole. Hey, grab on. Let me pull you out. Right? But in terms of me jumping in there to get somebody out, no. You don't know what's going to happen to you, right? So it's like, nah, we're not going back. And it's bittersweet because for a lot of your black men outside the box, for them, the number one preference is still black women. They just want black women outside of the box. That's what they're going for. That's the number one choice. It is what it is. Black women can say, no, it's not, but it is. That's why you got brothers screaming about wanting black women that grew up middle class, or, wanting black women that don't have black friends, or, black women that may have been called whitewashed. You have brothers saying, damn, that's what we want. We want a chick that's outside the box. Even though, we never really get credit for that. People act as if we've never brought that point up before. But, it is what it is. So with that being said, it's a problem because you have the women that want to be outside the box, but they feel like they're not strong enough to do it. They don't want to be the Lone Ranger. So they're hoping that they're going to find a man that's going to help them escape the box. So he's going to find me at the club. He's going to find me at the church. He's going to find me at the lounge or wherever we are, right? And he's going to notice that I want to be outside the box. He's outside the box, and we're going to live happily ever after. Peace out to the homegirls that I was kicking it with, but I found the man that I want. But I say that it's bittersweet and that it's a fantasy because it's not going to happen. Because in order for that to happen, what do I have to do? I have to go back into the box to find you, right? And like I said, nowadays you have a lot of women that can put up a good front. A lot of women, maybe back in the day it was easier. I don't know. Maybe some older gentlemen could come on and say, yeah, in the 80s and the 90s, you could find out the right ones. But now, it's not, because you have a lot of women who are lying. A lot of women have got better. It's just like your criminals. They've gotten a whole lot better at what they do. They got a whole lot better at impersonating other people. That's why I did the video a couple of months ago about, you can't even look at how a black woman is really dressed or her style and say, oh, she's Afrocentric or she's progressive. Maybe in the past you can say, oh, look how she dresses, look at her hair, look at what she's into. But you have a lot of women that are faking it. You got baby mamas or chicks on some bullshit who have that bohemian sort of style, that naturalistic sort of look. Oh, yeah, I've seen baby mamas with dreadlocks or whatnot, on some fake Afrocentric sort of tip. So you have a lot of women on BS that got better at their BS. So it's that much harder, to go back in and act as if you can pull a rescue mission. We're going to get her in and we're going to leave quickly, under the radar. It's not going to happen, right? So with that being said, it is bittersweet. Because I do feel like if you got these people to connect, it's a wrap. It's easy. It's almost cake at that point, right? Because they know the value of being outside the box. They know that there's not too many other black people outside the box, so there's going to be more of a push to make it work. No time for games, no time for gimmicks. There's no time for lowball offers. You're going to fully appreciate who that woman is. You're going to fully appreciate who that man is. But it is bittersweet because what a lot of you guys want to be rescued, to be found and taken out of that world, it's not going to happen because a lot of brothers just aren't going to go back into that lifestyle because, A, they don't want to. You know, there may be some memories that they don't want to revisit that are legit, right? B, you guys have the key, so you're not, you know, this sort of princess that needs to be saved. As, you know, as dark and as gloomy as that dungeon may be that you're in, you have the keys to get out, so use the keys to get out, right? And C, there's a lot of women who are faking the funk. And there's a lot of women that are good at faking, and there's a lot of women that are good at lying. So for a lot of men, the ultimate test is, hey, can she exist outside the box? If she's there, we're all good. Because it's also a sign of your strength, truth be told. You know, I'm going to look at you and notice that, oh, man, you know, she's outside the box. That's not easy. I'm going to respect that. I'm going to give you points for that because I know it's very difficult. You know, in the same way that black women may look at a certain man, you know, who may be walking to his own, on his own path and he gets it. Oh, you know, it's not easy to, you know, be a black man that's not giving in to the sort of stereotypes. It's the same way we feel. Oh, it's not easy to have, you know, the sisterhood, right? You know, sister girls. You know, it's not easy to have Ebony magazine or whatnot, right? But you're here. So I am going to give you points because that is a sign of your strength. I like that. You know, that's a quality that I would like what? My daughter to have. Right? So you're going to win points. So, you know, once again, you know, we have our rationale for not wanting to go back. That's why I say it's not going to be a debate. Because I know there's going to be women that will say, well, why not? You should rethink it. Well, that's wrong for you to feel that way. You know, it is what it is. Like I said, it's not up for negotiation. That area is not going to be brought back up. So bittersweet. Bittersweet. And I've kind of talked about what you can do to lessen the impact of walking to the beat of your own drum. You know, I did those videos before in the past, but, you know, of course, because it's not a hot topic, you know, a lot of women don't really ponder on it. You know, as much as the women complain about brothers being one-sided or brothers repeating themselves, whenever you do have videos that are going in a different direction, you guys aren't there in droves. You're not. You guys are attracted to the stuff that frustrates you for whatever reason, right? Which, like I said before, brings up a whole lot of other issues that are not even related to dating at all, right? You know, a lot of black women don't need a good man. You know, they need a psychologist. You know, they need some mental health people because there's a lot of problems there, truth be told, that have some issues that need to be addressed professionally. But anyways, you know, I've said what we can do. And maybe, you know, if I have the spirit and the time, I'll go back into how you as a black woman can start to operate outside of the box. It's not easy. You know, you don't have to jump off into the deep end like you know, like a pool. You walk into the shallow end and then you work your way to the deep end. There's stuff that you can do. And, you know, depending on the response I get and how I'm feeling, you know, I may revisit that area, you know, and get back into it, you know, because, you know, you do get tired of trying to convince people that they need to change or try to open up their eyes, because a lot of it is them being stubborn. They get it, but they want to be stubborn. So it's like, you know, you want to focus on the women that do get it or whatnot. So it is what it is. Like I said, it's bittersweet. Y'all let me know how you feel, what you think. Take it easy. God bless. You know the drill.